aren't here. Now the recorder is on. Today is Thursday, May the 20th, 2021. This is the YARcce Blockchain Self-Directed Study Group. Today we're featuring Barry James from Sheffield, England, to do a presentation. And we'll do some introductions and things, first of all, to give Barry some background information to know about the audience, and do some hand gestures to say how to signal things during the meeting without disrupting, and just to get us kind of warmed up. Let's try the hand gestures. That's a good way, it's a kind of an icebreaker with an audience. Some of the folks have been through this before. Play along with me, do the hand gestures with me, kind of give me your forbearance in doing that. Steve, put your camera on so we can see you're participating. First one is, bring it to a point. Bring it to a point. Can you do that? Bring it to a point. That's it. So you remember, muscle memory, bring it to a point. The second one is speed it up. Speed it up. If you're sitting there and you're kind of feeling this emotion, why the heck doesn't he speed it up? Just express yourself. It's okay. Instead of being frustrated inside and getting anxious or, building up your blood pressure, just say, come on, speed it up. Okay, let's keep it going. Next one is stop and move on to something else. Stop. We're going down a path we don't want to go. So stop. Okay. Not real good at following instructions here. I know it's not easy. It's to do. Thank you for those of you who are at least giving me a shot. Next one is bring it to a close. Somebody's saying something, let's just bring this part to a close in some way. Real easy to do. Now a new one this time. We haven't used before. For those who were here previously, here's a new one. If someone has their mic open and there's all kind of background sound that's getting disrupted, the symbol. If enough of us do this, somebody might notice and mute their microphone. Just you're disrupting, and we don't want to point somebody out necessarily, but we're hearing sounds that should be silenced so we don't interrupt the speaker. Yeah.
So Ed, which finger was that you put up? I just want to make sure that I didn't get it wrong.
Phil, you're on dangerous territory here. It was this finger.
Like that. Come on. In the water, that's all.
It was the finger that says, what are you doing, Phil?
Okay.
Good job, Phil. Let's do a quick survey. So we need you to take part in a little poll. And here's the polls, just 2 questions. Answer the questions. And if I can figure this out, last time it didn't work from my end. And we'll show what the answers are. We got everybody? Should be about 12. One more to go. One more to go on the poll? No, Steve's not maybe listening in at this point. So, all right. Here we'll end the poll. Let's see if it allows me to display. Oh, here comes Steve Ramarini. Share the results. There's the results. Let me admit somebody else. So yes, 8 of the people have been here before. 3 have not. 7 of the people are on Mighty Networks, 4 are not. All right, just some data. And let's close that up just from there, and let's start. Steve Ramarini, welcome. Good to see you soon, hopefully. For Barry's sake, can we do some quick introductions? Basically, who you are, where you are. And Barry asked a question, what do you know about blockchain in general? And let's do kind of a 1 to 5, where 1 is very little and 5 is Barry the expert. And however you think you fall in between there. And if you want to add any little bit about, what strikes you about blockchain, just as long as we just kind of keep it rolling along so we don't take too much time away from Barry. So I'll start. My name is Ed YARcce. I'm in Allentown, Pennsylvania. I, like Ron and Steve here, is a founding member of YARcce, and something we're hoping that we can keep on growing, and hopefully others like you might join us at somewhere along the line to help the broader agenda. And I guess I put myself in terms of blockchain about a 3 or so at this point. and I have been learning via what we have been doing in YARcce for more than a year from a lot of people who know a lot more than I do. And probably the more I learn, the lower my score goes because I know how much more there is to learn. So from there, let me turn it over to Rick. So we will each pass it on from person to person. Rick, you're up.
Good. I'm a Vistage chair in California, and I would rate myself at optimistically a 1.25. So I'll pass it on to Barry.
Hi, I'm Barry James. I am the menu this evening. I'm on the menu this evening. I'll go with 1.25 as well, because I've been doing this, as you said, Ed, so long I know how much there is to know. Okay,
That says something about me.
And I will pass it on to Ron.
I'm Ron Henderson, and I'm down in Fredericksburg, Virginia. And I find it hard to answer that question because there is a depth at the end of this thing as to how to build blockchains themselves that I know I do not know much about. But I certainly have got a lot of exposure to all kinds of different stuff and know there are lots of problems and lots of opportunities. And I will pass it from there to Stephen. You're muted.
Stephen Bentley. I'm in Billings, Montana. Relatively retired fairly recently. Was involved with a professional employer organization. And as far as blockchain goes, probably a 0.1. And I'm not sure it'll ever get beyond that. But we'll see. How about Mr. Greg Branham?
Thanks, Steve. My name is Greg Bramham. I'm in the Arlington, Virginia area, do business with the federal government here in the greater Mid-Atlantic region. My knowledge of blockchain, very similar to Steve's, probably 0.1, but fascinated by it, watching it, and eager to learn more. Turn it over to Jed.
Jed.
You need to unmute, Jed.
Hi, everybody. Jed Daly, Vistage Chair in Diamond Bar, California, which is about 25 miles east of downtown LA. I'm on that sort of 0.1 scale when it comes to blockchain as well. I kind of know what underlies cryptocurrencies and that it's supposed to have lots of potential, particularly for asset tracking, but I have no clue how it works. And I'm interested mostly because I'm curious what investment opportunities it might provide and how it might affect my members.
Pass it on, Jed.
Let's go with Caroline.
Hi, from Alexandria, Virginia. I would probably say I'm now at a 1 with blockchain. I've done an extensive amount of reading. I've taken a couple of courses, but it's probably more like 1 out of 20 rather than 1 out of 5, because it's a huge topic and fascinating. And I'm handing it over to Phil.
Thank you. Well, I'm Phil Liebman. I'm in the lower Hudson Valley region of New York. I am former Vistage Chair. I run a company called Alps Leadership. I don't think I'm going to give it a number. I'll just describe that the improvement in my awareness and understanding of blockchain is now I can use it in a sentence.
Good test.
Yeah, with some reasonable assurance that I'm using it correctly now, it has become part of my vocabulary, replacing just simply Bitcoin, meaning everything. And that's that. I don't know where that puts me on the scale, but relative to where I began, I'm a few steps from the start. I'll pass it. Let's see here. Scott. Did we get you yet?
No, not yet. I'm Scott Reeves. I'm in Northern California, Pleasanton, California, chair. On a number like Phil, it's and everyone else, it's non-existent as it relates to understanding but starting to understand more and more, and interested for my members as well as myself. And I'll pass it on to Stephen. Have you gone?
Well, I went early. It's Steve Phillips from Charlotte, North Carolina. I thought I was a 1, but in listening to everybody, I'll revise that downward to point 1. And let's see, who has not, Hannibal, have you gone?
Yeah, I can introduce myself again. Hannibal Inca. I'm in Williamsburg, Virginia. My knowledge is sub 0.1, very, very limited.
Pass it on.
Virginia.
Williamsburg, Virginia. Is anyone left? Possibly. Oh, Les.
Hi, I'm Les Scadarzi. I'm in Reston, Virginia. I used to run an energy simulation company for doing policy simulations in the climate change area. I sold that company about a year ago to Key Logic Systems. I'm now a strategic advisor to them and a member of Les Smollen's business group. I'm here to learn. I know very little about blockchain.
Anybody left? We didn't get to.
Les, could you talk a little closer to the mic?
Absolutely. My tendency is to speak quietly, so yeah, just remind me.
Okay.
There's not one for be loud.
We have to get a new hand signal.
Right.
Exactly.
Can't hear you.
Got it.
All right. We've laid the groundwork for today. The recording is on, and it's time to turn it over to Barry. And Barry, you have screen sharing capability as you need and want to use it.
Great. Well, I'll go almost straight into that, but first of all, good to be here, and thank you for asking me to do this. Bit of background on me. Who's talking? What does he know? Why is he talking about this stuff? I'll just rearrange the tiles just slightly, get that out the way. Excuse me 1 second, because it will help if I've got that way over there. I think actually it's better. So, okay, so my background is technology, although I've spent the last 20, 30 years as an entrepreneur, but my career started in what I now call Jurassic FinTech, which was designing software for a bank back in the days when banks were the only ones on the high street who had computers. So goes back a long way. In fact, it even goes back before that. So spent my entire career basically interested in and working at the forefront of technology, first of all fintech, then medtech, then working with a lot of innovators and supporting them. And in this last 10 years or so, working in alt finance, initially as a national champion for crowdfunding, working with Parliament here and internationally as well. But over the last few years, as blockchain's come along and has begun to mature, I have ended up as the chair of something called the British Blockchain and Frontier Technologies Association. It's worldwide, it's not just British, but it started here. So that's kind of part of the thing. I'm a writer, and I write these days for FinTech Times. A history of writing for Crowdfund Insider and City AM and others. We did and still do run something called the Crowdfunding Center from the early days of crowdfunding. So we collect data on crowdfunds from around the world, 800,000 plus. And these days, I'm, as usual, doing stuff at the leading edge. So we are, as we shall see in a minute or two, at a very interesting stage of development that has been triggered by blockchain. As we'll see, most of the central banks around the world, the nations of the world, are now working on creating their own digital currency. And we're not talking about Bitcoin here, we're talking about the digital dollar, the digital pound, the digital euro, and so on. And we're right at the beginning of exploring the opportunities, threats, and implications of all of that for business, but also for society at large, and so on. And that's the Remaking Money project, which I'll mention later and as we go. So, okay. So today's objectives, actually, I was originally going to try and kind of leapfrog a lot of stuff and try and get straight into the implications for executives and managers, but when I sat down to do this, and I'm glad I did, you know, having had the poll we just had, I just feel today we need to lay some of the foundations. So over time, and if we get there today, great. But we may need more than one session to do this. The overall objectives I'd like to achieve for you is to put you in a position where you have a sufficient understanding of the things that you need to know about this paradigm shift in technology, to understand how it, not just so much how it works, but it's, you know, how it can change things and what it means to businesses, to society, and to so on. So, you know, what are the to surface the opportunities, threats, and so on. But we're going to do some foundational work first. I hope it'll be interesting. We're going to start off with, as you can see there, I've put the title Blockchains, GovCoins, and the Remaking of Money Digital. And we'll talk about why I'm saying it's over the next 5 years, but deliberately put, you know, an S on the end of blockchains there, because colloquially we tend to talk, a lot of people tend to talk about the blockchain, and that's kind of understandable. But actually there are many blockchains. There are dozens of blockchains. So that's the kind of first thing to know about it. And we'll get into where they came from and all the rest of it very shortly. And what I'm going to try and do in this area, because it's a paradigm shift, and you see this again and again, a shift in the way of thinking, a new lens, that requires a new lens to understand it. It's absolutely heaving with myths and legends and opinions presented as fact and so on. So I'm going to try and, you know, create a bit of a path through that. Some things are facts, they're true. 2 and 2 is always 4. Certain things happened on a particular date. Other things are opinions, and I'm going to try and base this firmly in fact. But as we go, I want to make it really clear from the outset that please, questions are welcome. Please put them in the chat. If there's enough of them, maybe we'll pause along the way to take them. I'll try and keep an eye open for them. But Ed, feel free to flag something up if I need to do that. To stop for one or more. But I definitely want your questions. We'll get to them at the end, if not before. Okay. And yes, I will put it full screen for now, although I may change that in a little while. Okay. So I said just now that we're on a 5-year countdown to the remaking of money. Why 5 years? Well, this is a map produced by the Bank of International Settlements. This is the sort of bank of banks. And their recent report says that 86% of central banks around the world are now at one stage or another, denoted by the colours, working on what's called a CBDC, a central bank digital currency. Why is this important? Well, part of the holy grail of this alt movement, which is Bitcoin and Ethereum and all of the other cryptocurrencies, is the holy grail is acceptance. The holy grail is take up. But actually, within 5 years, we're going to see take up of a different kind of coin, a different kind of electronic coin, happen around the world, because when governments do things, it becomes available to all the citizens and so on. And gov coins is a new term. This is The Economist from, I think, about 2 weeks ago. And it was a response, or it certainly came out within a week or two of the recent announcement from the Bank of England of its digital sterling project. So the Bank of England has announced its plans. It's going through a decision-making process right now. And that's part of the picture. But, you can see that The Economist taking this seriously. There's a little behind the curve. It's not the best report, but we can, it gives an idea. So I'm still saying, why 5 years? Okay. And the reason that this is happening actually goes back to something that should be down here somewhere. No, I didn't get to include it, but I'll go back. So 2 years ago, you might remember all the kerfuffle about something called Libra, which was kicked off by Facebook when they were proposing to create their own digital currency. And the world got in quite a flurry of frantic activity over that, because the implications gradually became really very clear. And that has provided, as I said it would back then, 2 years ago, we had a debate back then at London FinTech Week, provided a wake-up call. And since then, things have been moving. But actually, the digital yuan, which is now in trials in 4 cities, across 4 cities in China, well, they've been working on that for 6 years. So, this is the culmination of a lot of work. And there's definitely a sense, and there's definitely reasons to think as well, that a lot of the work that's now going on and the kind of increased urgency, even over and above what we saw a couple of years ago, is being driven by the need to respond and to keep up. Interestingly, there was a video from 10th of February, which was before the digital euro project was announced, which it's about the same time, a little before, I think, the Bank of England project, when Christine Lagarde, the head of the European Central Bank, actually put a time scale on the digital euro. And she said very clearly, the interviewer asked her, you know, is this something that's long term? Will you still be in your post when this happens? And she said, oh, no, don't even think like that. Yes, I will be in post. And it's, you know, we're talking about for 4 to 5 years. So just want to give you a feel for where we are in you know, the development of digital money, digital currencies, and that this is a broader canvas now, much broader canvas than just things like Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. And by the way, I went to get that that clip today, and interestingly, it's been removed from YouTube, and we're seeing a lot of maneuvering going on right now. It's a really interesting and very active field. This is my column, the latest edition of my column, the countdown to digital money for FinTech Times, which you may or may not find useful. And as I said, this is the Bank of England project, together with the government, Her Majesty's Treasury, announced just over almost 3 weeks ago. And in case you kind of, you know, think this is a rest of the world issue, it's not. The Federal Reserve have announced 5 pilot projects, and this is only very recently. But America is in a slightly different position to the rest of the world because, of course, the dollar is the world's reserve currency and plays a systemic role around the world there. So in many ways has, you know, in terms of swings and roundabouts, has more to lose and possibly more to gain as well, but certainly more to lose than many of the countries around the world. And this is probably reflective also of the fact that the first government digital currency, national digital currency, was implemented late last year in the Bahamas. So it's, you know, the small states, the small countries that have the potential to up their game, you know, and punch well above their weight, that, you know, are diving into this very early for good reasons. Of course, that doesn't apply to China. China's very much seeing this, it's very clear, as a strategic thing, and as a way of, at the very least, hedging and being freeing themselves from some of the implications of the dollar as the global reserve currency. I mentioned the Remaking Money project, which is what we're working on. So we'll be picking this apart and commentating on it going forward. You can come and find us and keep in touch with that if you'd like to. Okay, so first a little history. So let's just talk a little bit about what a blockchain is, why it's interesting, and why it's powerful, where it's come from, and it comes from 2 sources basically. You know, we I'll probably get between 2 or 3 of these slides, but it's really been created from 2 different streams of technology. One is this thing called a hash function. What's a hash function? A hash function is, it's like a checksum. It's a very sophisticated mathematical procedure whereby you can take any length of text or digital material at all and reduce it down to a set length in such a way that you can tell whether just by knowing the hash, whether the original content has changed or matches. So if, for example, I was to create a hash for the finished video for today and give it to someone, then if they needed to know whether the video that they were delivered a year later or a day later or whenever, different copy of it, they didn't have the original, but they had the hash, they could run that hash again, do the digest again, and it would be exactly the same because you use the same procedure. However, if it changed, if we edited at all, even one tiny element, one bit, one pixel, it would be completely different. So if you've got the hash of something, you can tell whether the original has been changed or not. So this leads to all sorts of possibilities and properties. It's sometimes called one-way mathematics or one-way form of one-way arithmetic, because it's practically, and I mean really practically, impossible to go in the other direction. And just having the hash of something doesn't enable you to go backwards. So if you had the hash of that video, that wouldn't mean that you could reconstruct the original video, but it would mean that you can validate whether that the video matched that you were given matched the original. So that's been around for a while. In fact, this chap called Hans-Peter Loon, who worked for IBM in R&D, gave it that name back in January of 1953. So it was there a long time before. And what blockchain did was to combine that technology, that capability, with something that's probably a bit more familiar, and that's peer-to-peer technology. So what's peer-to-peer technology? Well, you probably remember Napster and its imitators, LimeWire and all the rest. And what that did was move away from the concept of having all the content, all the music on a server somewhere and everyone going to the server. What it did was it allowed peer-to-peer file sharing. So in effect, what that did was break each music file down into tiny fragments and spray them onto, in a very trackable way, onto the hard drives of the participating computers, people's laptops and computers in their bedrooms and so on. And then when I wanted to download a particular song, what it could then do is pull on those fragments and pull them back together again and reconstruct. And that meant it was resistant to attack. So obviously copyright played a role here. So if you've got a central server with a load of music on, you're very likely to get a knock on the door from the industry association, and that'll get taken down. Very much harder to take down a peer-to-peer network. And what the originator of the modern blockchain, this new technology that sparked it all off, did was combine those two things. And we'll look at how that happened in a moment or two. you may have heard of Satoshi Nakamoto. He or they, it's not known, was behind this. It was an effort to move aside from just after 2008 and into 2009 from the problems of the financial system and what was happening. So what Satoshi Nakamoto did was that he created this new thing called Bitcoin. But in order to create it, he brought these two technologies together and created this network based on, peer-to-peer computers he didn't own, all the participants owning their own computers and acting as nodes rather than servers, all cooperating together. And that was the blockchain. At one point in history, there was only one blockchain. It was a Bitcoin blockchain. And then we move on. And as we'll see, the blockchain is able to use that. Blockchain technology is able to use that technology to solve what's called the double spending problem. Because prior to that, if you've got a banknote, it's hard to forge. But if I was to send you anything digital prior to this technology becoming available, you could just duplicate it. Hence, we could just duplicate music and duplicate video and so on. We're kind of used to it with digital, but that makes it really just about impossible to have something like a coin, because if you can spend it multiple times, it becomes meaningless, and that's what it did. So we'll move through from there to today, and today there are not just dozens but thousands. There's, at the beginning of this year, more than 5,000 different coins, all with different characteristics and purposes, running on lots of different blockchains, and also these things called Tangles, which are like blockchains but more advanced in some ways. So now there are dozens of these. There's dozens of blockchains. There's dozens of Tangles, and there's thousands of different coins or tokens running on them. As I mentioned, Napster goes back to 1999, so this was well before it's kind of part of the development behind the technology. So first we had the Bitcoin blockchain, which was, I saw something earlier in the week, going back to earlier days. Bill Gates is famously anti-Bitcoin these days, pro-blockchain, anti-Bitcoin. But when he was first talking about it, he described what had been achieved as a technological tour de force. And actually what happened, what was achieved by Satoshi Nakamoto and the people who were involved, was wildly successful. This is something that has, gone way beyond the proof of concept that you could have, is all that you could have expected at that point. It was the very first. It was launched. It's still running. It's still being maintained, and we all know it had a bad hair day yesterday. But that says nothing about the technology, which has proved itself, and therefore being widely copied, as in being widely changed and improved. So why? What was so different? Well, I just noticed, I've glanced over at some of the questions. Let me see if I can, let me see if I can take one of the questions at least. Where does a hash exist? Is it simply code? No, it's almost it's data. So it exists, you know, linking one element of a chain to the next element of the chain. So each block is a block of data with a block of transactions in it. I produce a hash from that, and that's distributed across the network. So anyone with those two things can say whether that block is valid or not. And this is where the sort of whole consensus mechanism comes in. I'll come on to NFTs later on, and yes, I'll try and get as much in as possible. So that ability to create practical immutability comes from the decentralization. It comes from the distribution of each of those blocks and the hashes across the network. So once you've published something, you can't change it. And, you know, in essence, and this was, you know, this is true if you publish a book, unless you can, you know, get them all back and pulp them, you can't change history. And that's the principle behind it. But as I say, supported by this vast network of nodes. So we have this ability to have practical immutability. I say practical because, you know, is anything completely and utterly immutable? No. If there's a meteor comes and strikes the earth, then it'll wipe the whole thing out. But anything much short of that, it's practically immutable. You have traceability of transactions. So there's tools that do this, that can trace anything through a blockchain, a Tangle, or whatever. It can trace what, but not who necessarily. You know, if those transactions aren't, it's a big point. If those transactions aren't identified, it can't tell you who made that transaction, but it can tell you about the transaction. So it's immutable and identified. These are really important. And the original blockchain included this decentralized ledger, which gives the ability to track and trace who owns what. And it had all those virtues, plus the virtues of the internet and open source. So network effects applied, it's global, it's fast. I've put fast-ish because blockchain is now not really fast enough for a lot of the tasks that people are trying to use it for, hence a lot of the later developments. But it's also open source, which means anyone can get hold of the source and work on it and improve it. It's a really important point. This is infrastructure that can be created in someone's bedroom. Whereas before, to create infrastructure, you need a very substantial organization. And I'd encourage you, if you're interested, to look at this document, which is the Satoshi Nakamoto's original white paper describing the technology. And I'll just read you, it's a bit difficult to read on the screen there, but the abstract starts that he's creating a peer-to-peer version of electronic cash. Why? To allow online payments to be sent directly from one party to the other without having to go through a bank or other financial institution. So independence, peer-to-peer. The main benefits are lost of electronic transacting if a third party is still required to prevent double spending, which we've talked about. This paper is remarkable, not just in what it ushered in and the paradigm shift it created, but actually it's very clear. It's actually quite readable. So normally technical documents, you go, well, you don't need to know about that. You don't worry about it. But actually, it's interesting. So the white paper was first published at the end of October in 2008, clearly in response to the financial crash and wanting to, do something better. The ledger itself, which obviously is still running, the beginning of the blockchain, starts on the 3rd of January, but actually the software wasn't released until the 9th of January, the following year, 2009. This is all on Wikipedia, so you can go and have a look. Bitcoin is slow and it's power hungry. And the Bitcoin blockchain is slow and power hungry is actually what we're saying. There's a lot of controversy about this now. It gets a lot of actually quite unfair comparisons in many ways, but it's fair to say that compared to others that have coming after it, it's 1,000 times less energy efficient, and that is a factor. It's wasteful of energy. I'll not get into some of the detail there because someone will start waving that at me if I'm not careful. But the okay, Ed, I got it. The open source side of this does mean that these developments can happen in anyone's bedroom. Anyone can get their hands on this code and work on it. And that's why, it's one of the main reasons why, first of all, we have so many projects and we have so many coins around the world. One of the main ones you need to know about is Ethereum, or the ETH as the coin itself is called. Ethereum also uses this technology called technique, I should say, called proof of work. This is how blocks are formed and how they're assured that that they are valid. People have to kind of compete to do that, and it's deliberately made to be difficult. But one of the main, so it's very similar to blockchain in that way, but it did something really quite interesting. There used to be a phrase, I think it came from Oracle originally, the network is the computer. And with both blockchain, but more so with Ethereum, in fact, mostly with Ethereum, I should say, the network, the nodes are the computer. So a chap called Vitalik Buterin, who started Ethereum, and which has now grown to a huge enterprise, he's a computer science geek, and he wanted to introduce programmability deep into this network, and he's done so. And Ethereum is now a sort of substrate on which a lot of other things are built. Its main problem these days is it's become expensive to use, where the dream and the reality in many cases is that the cost of transacting should be almost zero. It's become a bit of a victim of its own success. So moving on, what we're seeing is these things called DLT as distributed ledger technology. And blockchain now is one of a wide number of distributed ledger technologies. Some of them are blockchains, some of them are Tangles, some of them are much less secure or sophisticated. But basically the idea is that you have everyone involved has a copy of the ledger so that they're all kept in sync. And therefore you've got a level of ability to cross-check and make sure that things are being done open and above board. However, what we're now seeing, and this is kind of bringing us towards the curve of what I was talking about before with national currencies, is a degree of re-centralization. So Bitcoin's objective and the Bitcoin blockchain objective was to decentralize, just much like the internet was conceived to withstand a nuclear strike. So it had to have no center that could be hit. And again, Napster, applied that in a new way. The idea behind, as we read just now, the blockchain, the Bitcoin blockchain was to be decentralized. Actually, it's now being re-centralized in the implementations that have kind of taken and cherry-picked features and facilities by banks in the first instance, and now by central banks and governments. So that's a big change. Restoring sort of humans back into the equation and human authority back into the equation and intermediaries. And so we've got now kind of two streams. We've got a whole new world springing up of what's called DeFi or decentralized finance that is duplicating gradually, or actually at speed, a lot of the functions in terms of stock, currency exchanges and derivatives and everything you can imagine in the financial realm being re-engineered and redone, in a decentralized way. Hopefully this will give you a bit of a handle on some of that. This diagram borrows some of the language that was used literally last week by the Bank of England. And if we go along the bottom there, they were talking about public money and private money. This is the chap who leads that charge, who leads the project, and public money is the money produced by the central bank, or the Fed in your case, banknotes and coins. And not a lot of people understand this, but actually the rest of money, the majority of money, 90-something% of money, is actually created as credit by commercial banks. And that's how it comes into existence. And it's digital in the sense that it's on a ledger somewhere, but obviously one belonging to a bank or an institution. And that's kind of where we are now. The world we're headed for has analogues of both those things. So we already have in the top right-hand corner there things called stable coins. One of the most famous of these is called Tether. So one Tether is worth $1. For each Tether in existence, there is, or supposed to be anyway, $1 sitting in the company's bank to back it up. There's a bit of controversy over whether that's really the case or not, but Tether exists, is being used. It's called a stable coin. Why is it a stable coin? Because unlike Ethereum or Bitcoin, it's tethered. Its value is tied to the value of something else. In this case, each Tether is $1. And what we're now talking about is over here, which are called central bank digital currencies, or gov coins, which are electronic, or start off, the starting point is a electronic version of a dollar note, a dollar bill, if you like, or a pound coin. And these are the things that are being brought into existence. To give you a feel for the importance of what's happening, we're moving to a world of programmable money, and the implications of that are almost unimaginable. The privacy implications are obvious ones. The innovation implications are less obvious. There is a huge well of possibilities. The data implications are huge. The implications in terms of management control of the economy are huge. And this is obviously one of the things that China is attracted by, for example. So we're entering a really, really interesting and critical phase. I'm going to sort of come and close up very shortly, because I think we need to allow some time for questions, and otherwise Ed will probably beat me up later. He's shaking his head, but I don't believe it. But a couple of things. If you want to know more about DeFi and some of the interesting things that are happening now, I recently interviewed one of the leaders in the field, a chap called Jamil Sheikh from New York. I'll get you these slides. You can click through and listen to that. We'll give you a starting point to get up to speed with some of that. Initial coin offerings are where probably around 3,000 by our count of those coins came from. There was a period of about 2 years when these just went like wildfire, and then they got clamped down on by the SEC and others. But the guy who started all that was a chap called J.R. Willett from Seattle. Again, I interviewed him a couple of years ago about all that, and there's a link to that as well for you. I've already mentioned this, so you know where to find us. So look, I want to get to the end of this conversation, but it's not going to happen today, as I suspected it wouldn't. I hope you found it interesting, and I hope by the end of today you'll feel a bit more able to speak blockchain. But I'm going to turn the screen share off, and should we do sort of live questions, and then I'll go to some of the ones from the chat if we need to. Who'd like to start?
Barry, thank you for this. This has filled a few holes I was unaware of. I did sign up for your Remaking Money, but I haven't had anything. Is that, are you sending out posts or information, or?
There's yes, we will be. It's kind of early days at the moment. We're working on a number of guides, a citizen's guide and an essential guide for legislators and so on. But they'll be coming along. So sit tight for a bit, would you?
Barry,
Hi.
do you see a battle between the rebel army of developers and the Death Star of the federal banks trying to take this space over?
I do see a big war coming, but it's going to be a little different to that, I think. So just about everyone in what's known as the crypto community 2 or 3 years ago was of the opinion that, a bit like Napster was of the opinion, you can't catch me, that you can't track us down, and so on. It's decentralized. The authorities can't get us. And actually, it was a reasonably plausible case up to then. However, about 18 months, 2 years ago, I'll tell you from my point of view, because it's interesting and tells the story as well. I actually went to Vienna to the UN building to a meeting of something called FATF. That's the UN's Financial Action Task Force. When they basically unveiled to the industry their strategy for putting them in their place. And I walked out of that building convinced that their strategy, is watertight. It's going to work. It's working. The strategy is basically to own and regulate all the entry and exit points to crypto land, in effect. So that battle, although most of the cryptosphere seem to be unable to believe this, so a lot of the rebel army are still in denial, Ed. In my view, perhaps I'm wrong. Perhaps they know something I don't, but I don't think so. Where the battle is going to be drawn is in geopolitics, I believe.
Yeah.
So what China is doing is very advanced. They've embraced blockchain early, more than 6 years ago. They embraced AI early, and they've been working on this to great effect. So they've drawn in. They were already as a society well ahead in terms of payments. So WeChat and Alibaba and all of that were years ahead of us. And I say us, I'm talking transatlantically here. But actually what they're bringing in, it looks very much like what they're bringing in with the EU has great ambition internationally. There's a really good book. It's called Cashless by Richard Turin. I'll add the link to some of the materials where he analyzes, what's this about? And he says it's about creating an alternative global system for transacting, not just money, not just payments, but transacting overall as well. I think we're shaping up, on the one side we have the dollar, the global reserve currency, with, as I said before, potentially a lot to gain, but an awful lot to lose. On the other side, we've got China, and as well as a lot of other nations working on this. I mean, as recently as yesterday, I think it was, someone came out, it was actually a madman, and said that the EU should be banned, and we should ban it. It shouldn't be allowed even in China. How you do that without gunboats, I don't know. But I mentioned earlier on, that YouTube video has been taken down. Things like that are happening. We're seeing, I think, sort of beginnings of shifts happen in the beginnings of those maneuverings. Hope that paints a picture for you. Rick?
What do you see as the primary factors likely to determine the outcome?
There are two that spring straight to mind. China's got a massive lead. They've got a 6-year plus lead. They've also, I'm not an advocate for China, and I'm definitely not an advocate for communism. Don't get me wrong at all. However, they do have the ability to command and control. And they've used it to great effect in this instance. So they're in a formidable, it's not apparent yet, but it will become apparent over the next 3 to 5 years that they're in a formidable position. And it may well be that one of the symptoms of that as we go forward is we'll see businesses around the world being offered this infrastructure that is almost frictionless and free to use. To use, and most nations may well go, well, that's great, and what will America do? And that's the other question: what will America do? Because it's looking flat-footed at the moment. It's looking as if the biggest problem might be complacency.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, was that rather shocking?
Can you say more? How come we've been flat-footed and so complacent? Was it to do with the administration that has just gone in the last 4 years? Or, I mean, with all the innovation here, why are we falling so short?
It's a really good question. And the administration over the last 4 years, I don't think helped much. But it's difficult to know what would have happened 4 years ago if, it had gone the other way. It certainly didn't help much. But it's I think it's fair to say that we did know that China was embracing blockchain enthusiastically and working on some of these things. We saw a lot of activity in our parliament, actually, in the groups I was moving in, with a lot of funding happening of all party parliamentary groups and so on. But it wasn't really apparent what they've what they were, the shape of what they were doing until very recently when they went into trials. And I suppose another dimension to this is that this innovation that they're doing, it's there's a clue in the C, the first C of CBDC, central bank digital currency. It's a central, money as in the sort of central. Well, banks anyway aren't known for their innovation. The minimum about to get away with it is the truth. If the truth was known, has been the watchword over a hell of a lot of decades, isn't it? But actually, most of the innovation has been happening in the private sector through fintech, and that just kind of nibbling its way into the financial sector and the banks. This is a massive centralized, organized thrust through the central bank. So if you were to put it down to anything, you could probably say that centralized versus sort of private stroke decentralized approach in that respect, or you could just say it was lack of vision, actually.
Wow.
Barry, what's going to be the interchange between currencies? Could Bitcoin or Ethereum be the interchange method between state-owned currencies?
No, I don't think so. It's unlikely because of their instability. So the whole point of stable coins, and you can think of these new currencies as state-backed stable coins, is that stability, is the fact that they don't fluctuate. Yes, okay, they go up and down on the foreign exchanges. So I expect that there will be a new mechanism that is developed. One thing we can say for absolute certain, I can tell you for certain, is we know that the central banks worldwide are well coordinated on this. So there is now a massive worldwide effort on this. If we're having to sort of do this overnight, the exchanges already exist where you can exchange, pounds or dollars for Ether or Bitcoin or whatever, and they, it's sort of you could see it as an extension of that. It's difficult to predict, but I suppose that it's much more likely that the governments and central banks will come together and create a new infrastructure that is in the regulated domain.
So there must be a fairly substantial private trading function that exists now between crypto and traditional currencies.
Oh yeah. I mean the volumes are very substantial. I tend not to carry the market caps in my head, but you can go and look them up, and they're very, very, they're very substantial. Yeah, there's a lot going on. There's I don't know, a couple of dozen crypto stroke fiat exchanges. Obviously, the most famous being Coinbase. There's a couple of dozen others. They're being reduced because the regulators are closing in on them. So the smart money is. I said I'd tell you when it wasn't a fact. It's my view that we'll almost certainly end up with a handful, and that they'll be heavily regulated.
Barry, we're down to about 12 minutes. We've got 12 people on the screen. So if we can take less than a minute each. I'd like each person to kind of check out and just briefly answer, what did you learn today? And what else are you now curious about because of what you learned here? And I'll quickly start by saying I learned today that this power struggle part that is coming is certainly going to be intriguing as nation states begin to take a look at this. I'm intrigued by it because a futurist that I knew years ago and in 1989 sent me a paper of his that suggested that nation states are in the decline. And like kingdoms changed into nation states will change into something else. So this feels like a tremendous paradigm shift of some kind here. But all I'm primarily interested, I want to learn more, is how to keep my boat afloat as all of these behemoths start splashing around in the pond. I don't want to be tanked over in my little savings in retirement. So,
great. Can I make a plea as we go round? Just tell me what you'd like to know next as well. I think you've answered that question.
That's
So I'd like to know from everyone else.
what you'd like to learn next. Rick, you want to go next?
Sure. Then you raise a very important point for me. How does one assess investing in cryptocurrency, and the volatility demonstrated in the last couple of days can be extraordinary.
It's a whole subject in itself. Yeah. Sorry, I'll shut up now.
Pass it on, Rick.
Let's see, Les.
First off, I want to thank you. That was great. I came in with very little knowledge, and you at least expanded a little bit. Now I know all the things I don't know, which is always helpful, right? I guess the question I'd ask is, there's an overhanging sense of the attack on sovereignty of nations that comes around this.
Mm-hmm.
And what does that imply with both what would happen in the euro and all the issues they've been having the last 10 years, and what would happen in the United States as the globalization issue kind of comes home? So how does that play into the crypto / international digital currency world?
And pass it on, Les.
Ronald. Ron?
Oh, yeah. For me, I really appreciate what you told us today, Barry. And what I really do want to learn more about is what platforms will have the easiest to write smart contracts on. And I will pass it to Stephen.
Steve, your mic's muted.
You're muted. You're muted, Stephen.
What I learned was it's far more developed than I thought it was. 5 years is close to tomorrow. I differ from Rick wanting to invest in cryptocurrencies. That to me sounds like a floating crap game. But the EFTs of fintech may be an interesting thing to look at, more interesting than I thought of an hour ago. And I'll pass it on to Caroline.
What keeps you up at night, Barry? Because I'm with Ed, worrying about what this is mean for our own money, and secondly, what does it mean for the world if China is so far ahead?
What's the thing you'd like to know next? Was the other half?
That's what I'd like to know next.
Okay.
I want to know what's keeping you up, and you know, a little bit more about what's your view about our existing money and the implications of China being so far ahead.
Thank you. Pass it on.
Oh, sorry. Who hasn't gone?
Ray?
Hey, hi, Ray.
First, I apologize for joining late.
Late, yeah.
And I would say I've learned a little bit more in depth some of the things that I was already aware of. So I've gone deeper in my understanding of how some of them work. And I'm particularly interested in this sovereignty question because I think the geopolitical ramifications of that are enormous. And I think we are very far from being able to fathom what that's going to mean. But in terms of what I would like to learn next, I think it would be whether, in fact, this big thrust that central banks are making into cryptocurrency actually destroys the interest of having them. Because if the interest really is in having them be, distributed, not centrally managed, not part of that central financial system, maybe having the central banks move into it just makes them kind of redundant in terms of sovereign currencies. So I'm interested to see, what's going to happen in that regard, whether cryptocurrency stays as something active and interesting, or whether it just gets absorbed into sovereign currencies in some way.
Barry, you have a few minutes because people dropped out real quickly, so we didn't get the full crowd to check in. Do you want to summarize anything or address any of the points that were made in the last 3 minutes?
I would if I could remember them. They're on the hopefully on the transcript, and I will come back to them. So in summary, the geopolitics of this is it's going to be a journey. It really is, and there's going to be challenges along the way. That's really clear to me. As you were last, Ray, I can remember your question and point, so I'll just spend a couple of minutes. I mean, one of the debates that is going to be had around the world is, Bill Gates famously several years ago said, we need banking, we don't need banks. And it's almost certainly not going to happen that the central banks absorb all the roles and working of commercial banks. It's almost certainly not going to happen like that. But there is going to be a big shift in the way that things work. So actually, you've asked me such good questions. I'm going to go away and mull. I hope they're not going to keep me awake too many nights, Caroline. But I'm looking forward to sort of chewing on them. You've been a great audience. Thank you.
Barry, one for you.
Ed, I'd love us to schedule something as a follow-up sooner rather than later, because we're hanging here on Barry's words.
Yeah, that was my question. What comes next?
Well, we've got another session on the schedule coming up on the 29th. If some of you have been in other meetings where Dave Sackett has been, Dave Sackett's a CFO finance guy from business, so he'll be approaching it different than Barry has been. And he's scheduled for the 29th. The announcement will go out in the next day or so. And then maybe we need to talk to Barry once more. There also was, for those of you who know George Ann, is it Goldblum, I believe? She had someone from a fintech company speak lately. I have the video of that, and I was considering reaching out to him because he really looked at some of the investment pieces and what's different in these circumstances now and give a different point of view. Because part of what also I've been listening for Barry to talk about in the future is it's not just cryptocurrencies, it's all of the enabling technology that is out there that maybe less might be intrigued by coming out of this. The ability to track supply chain.
Yeah.
And we heard Neil Pascal talking about VeChain and the functionality that provides. And, all of these other potentials on the blockchain technology that enables a very potentially rigorous and less attack prone internet. You've got the interplanetary file system, which has their own coin. These are all little economies setting up. So they may not be currencies. They're somewhere between currencies and stocks, but they're different, and they're going to give people a different influence.
I think another really interesting point that has major long-term implications is blockchain as a secure storage of, I'll call it, rights. Property rights, real estate, this whole range of things that in many instances is quite unstable now.
And I think the NFTs are a potential way to handle the distribution of intellectual property in the same way artists are pioneering it right now, because they've been building in an automatic royalty payment that is just, it's automated. It happens. The next time it's sold, the person who started the process gets a payment for their intellectual property in the next iteration. And there's just too much friction in the intellectual property area. We have technology, if we're going to address global warming, that's got to get out to the world much, much faster. And right now, that's more an obstacle than a help.
Apologies that I didn't get to NFTs. Next time, all right. And
all right, Barry, you and I will talk about scheduling you next time, and maybe the time after that too.
Yeah. Can I ask for one small favor? If you enjoyed this and you found it was helpful, please go to my LinkedIn profile and say so.
Oh, good.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you all. We're at the end of our time.
Bye-bye.
Time-wise, I'll send you off into the ether, and we'll turn off the recording and say goodbye.
Bye,
everyone.
Nice, guys. Thanks.
Ed, could you hang on for a moment? I see Ron is gone.